Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Dan, and this is my 2015 Nissan GT-R. And today we're going to talk about 10 different reasons why you should own a GT-R in 2020. So number 10, one of the great things about this car is the usability, the power. It's just so great that most cars at this level put down a lot of power, but they don't actually put it to the ground. So by having all-wheel drive with twin turbo, you get that nice mid-range torque. Anytime you want to just drop a gear and just give it a little bit of gas, just instantly grips. It's amazing. And that's one of the things I love about this car, the usability and the power. Reason number 9 is we're going to talk about the car itself and what a lot of people don't really know about this car and what it was designed for. So for myself, this car out of the box is a track monster. A lot of times when you buy a car, you have to do a lot of different things to get this car, ready to go, as far as being able to drive it at the track or take it out and you want to do a little bit more, experience or like a harder driving. So one of the great things about this car is there's not a whole lot you really have to do. Now, sometimes I'd recommend probably upgrading the brakes and rotors as they're kind of a point where they start cracking as they're drilled, but that's really not that big of a deal. So most recommendations is just some brake fluid, some pads and rotors, and this car is just amazing just out of the box as it is. So number 8, let's jump forward, and another great reason why I love owning this car is that just the handling out of the box is great. There's a lot of different settings that you can go over as well depending on what you actually like. So in most cases, sometimes people enjoy just driving around and doing a lot of roll racing. There's also a lot of guys that do a lot of drag racing. It seems like a big popular platform because this car can make a ton of power but also put it down. So depending on what your creature comfort is, part of that is that you can put this car in comfort mode, drive around, daily it, go get your groceries, or you can put it in more of a race-based mode where it's a little bit more engaging, a lot more firmer shifts, as well as harder on the suspension. So one of the things that we like to talk about as well, with that being said, is that a lot of guys recommend putting it on comfort mode when they're at the drag strip because it actually gives a little bit more forgiving in the suspension to get kind of out of the hole shot. Or if you're like me and you want to go to the actual track and circuit, by putting it into RRR mode, it's really going to beef up the suspension and the shifts, and it makes it a really great all-around car, even with the factory suspension. Now, a thing to note though is, even though mine is a 2015, from 09 to 14, the suspension was a lot stiffer, a lot rougher. And because of that, it's actually better for a person like me that likes to go track the car. But because in this case, Nissan got too many supposedly complaints, in 2015 and up, they started softening the suspension. So number 7 I would like to talk about is going into about the usability of the car overall. So in most cases, a lot of times a car that gets bought can only be driven around maybe 5 months, 6 months of the year, depending on parts where you live in. And for me, being in the Northeast, I like to drive my car a lot. And with that being said, we only get about 5-6 months of the year that are actually pretty good. Once fall comes around into the wintertime, it's really not the greatest conditions for a normal rear-wheel drive car or a car that puts down a good amount of power. But having this car, it's great because no matter what, this car can rip all year round. I used to daily drive this car all the time, and even with full bolt-on levels, this car is immaculate. It hooks, it grips, and with a nice set of winter tires, you can really drive this car through the winter every day with no problem. So going into number 6, we want to go into and talk about power levels. Basically, one of the things and one of the key things that people don't realize is that these cars do make a lot of power, but you can also hear and fear the times that sometimes people are blowing their motors or blowing their trances from an abundant amount of launches, and also because they're running too much boost. So one of the things in this car is that around 19 to 20 pounds full bolt-on is the perfect setup. You're not going to really damage the motor, especially if you have safeties in place, whether you're using an Ecotec or a Cobb. And at the same time, it's going to put down enough power where it's very usable and enjoyable. You'll be able to run 10 seconds out the gate if you're into running quarter mile, as well as you'll probably beat mostly 95% of the cars out there from the factory that are higher end. So with this car full bolt-on 85, you'll run on Huracans, Gallardos, R8s. There's a lot of cars that this car will put the hurt on. So it's a great car for the value out of the box. and there's not a lot of cars like it for this type of money, and it's really easy affordable too. So let's go into number 5. Let's talk about maintenance and a lot of different misconceptions. So one of the things that a lot of people don't recognize with this car is that it is a 100K plus car sticker, right? But a lot of times people think, well, the costs are very expensive, the consumables are expensive, and rightfully so they are. But there's a lot of different things that you can actually do to keep your dollar going a lot farther with this car than most people expect. So one of the things that we talk about is tires. And yes, this car loves to eat tires. But me personally, since I drive it a lot on the street as well, on and off the track, one of a great tire that a lot of guys use is the Nitto NT555s, G2s. Now, what's great about this tire is that they do hook. The grip is pretty good, not compared to like an R888, but you'll get at least 10,000 plus miles out of the tire easily, maybe more depending on your driving levels. It's got a 300 plus A tread wear factor, so this car can go really far with a tire and not kill you as much. So that's one thing that I like to talk about. Number 2, this car is really bulletproof, because for the most part, the only thing I've really done after my 2 years of ownership was just mainly fluids and upgraded brakes since I go to the track. But other than that, at full bolt-on levels, there's really not a whole lot you have to do with this car. It's great. I mean, after all, it is a Nissan, right? So reason number 4, and one of the 4 reasons why I love this car is, I'm not so much for the clout guy, but this car eats a ton of looks. And even though it's a car that for me, I always feel like I see a lot because a lot of my friends have the same car as well. The thing about this car is that it does stand out a bit is this car is red, so it kind of is a little, more brighter than most other GT-Rs. And it also helps that I have a giant APR GT500 wing on the back. So, the one thing that I don't look for as much, but anytime I'm coming down the road, anytime I'm just driving it around town, just easy driving, this car gets a ton of attention. Number 3 on why you should own this car as well, I want to talk about is that it's an overall around great car. And one of the things that I have to go into a little bit more is that this car is great even driving long distances. One of the creature comforts that we have in this car is obviously I talked about earlier about adjusting the suspension, adjusting the actual the car itself on the road, is that this car is pretty tame. Now, my setup, this car is full bolt-on. It does have, 3-inch downpipe straight back to a 4-inch exhaust and a muffler. Now, a lot of guys like to run this car the straight pipe and a lot of pops and bangs. I'm sure you've heard that a lot, and that's not really good for the car whatsoever. Some like it, some don't. Myself, I don't really care for it, so I don't have it tuned into the car. I think it's kind of silly and obnoxious and annoying, but you're going to get a lot more out of the car if the car's tuned properly, and you're going to get a lot more enjoyment out of the car as well. So, going into number 3 about this car, the fact that I can drive this to and from the racetrack and not even have to worry about putting it on a trailer. A lot of guys that I talk to that do like to track the car and or have track cars wind up having to trailer them a lot, just because of the time that the amount of power it puts down, or the type of wheel setup, or the car's obnoxiously loud that it's just not fun to drive. And so because of that, I can put this car in comfort. Since I have a muffler in the back, it's really calm and easy. It's not too drony on the highway, and I can cruise down to the track 2-3 hours away. And then from there, what I do is basically just drive it right onto the track the next day. I can do 5-6 sessions, really put the hurt and beat on the car itself. I really want to enjoy the car and use its max performance, what it was designed to do. Let it cool down and then drive it 2-3 hours home. And I've done that about 4 or 5 times this year. Number 2, going into buying this type of car into 2020 is that the actual value of this car has risen in recent time. Now, due to COVID and a lot of other things that are going on with the market, especially what Nissan talks about with the GT-R, the generation, and going into 2021, this car that was produced over the years has gone down in numbers, but it also has gone up in appreciation. So a lot of times we see a good value market for this car is in the 60s. A lot of times people see this car and drive this car and wind up selling it for more money later on. So another reason I love this car is the appreciative value this car has, and that even though they did make a lot and the car is kind of older since it's been around for about over 11 years now, the car still is timeless in itself. And so let's go into number 1. The one main reason why I bought this car is pure excitement. And one of the biggest things why I love this car and getting it into every car is that it's a car that almost wants me to never get rid of. This is the first car that it's actually done that for me. A lot of cars that I've bought and owned, I've had an M3, I've had an S4s, several other different cars prior to this, They were a lot of fun. They were great cars, but after a while, I got a little bored with the car, and I just didn't really appreciate it as much, and then I just moved on to the next thing. And this is the first car I bought that I solely enjoyed so much just because I can drive it, I can track it, I can do whatever, I can daily drive the car, and every time I get back in it, it's still so much fun. The throttle, having all-wheel drive, being able to drive it year-round if I want to. It's just, there's so many things about this car that's great. It's got great trunk room inside with 4 seats, so if you do have a family or other people, if you did have to get to a jam and squeeze where, you know, your typical supercar can only fit one person, it's great to be able to put stuff in the car, drive around, drive it any time of the year, and the car just cranks up and fires up right away. It's all amazing there. So, and if you do decide to get in this car, you're gonna have a blast. You're not gonna regret it. The car is just an amazing car all around. You know, I've beaten very high-end cars all the time, and for the value and money you can get from one of these cars, there's nothing like it. So thanks guys for tuning in today. Appreciate your time. Any questions that you guys have, drop it in the comments. Just let me know, and I'll be glad to jump in and answer them best I can.